So before the mission, I was always told that serving a mission was a priority for my family. And being that my mom's side of the family, they were converts to the church. They've always told us the stories of how the missionaries met them and how they became converted to the gospel. And so that was a major stepping stone for us as siblings to see that. And we were so grateful because my mom had shared all these experiences from her mission, and so did my dad. And they told us all the lives that they were able to bless. And so during my time that I was constantly playing football and basketball, that was pretty much my life when I was from the age of 8 to the age of 18. And so my father, he tried to implement the gospel in everything that I did. So he told me, these talents that you're blessed with and everything that you've been given is from your Father in heaven. And that was something I never lost sight of as I was able to travel around the United States and be able to play for these teams and travel to different places and play against, the top players in the States. And so time came when we were deciding, what high school to go to. And my dad told me that we needed to pick a high school that was good for me as far as getting scholarships to go to. And so while we were looking around the valley, my brother, who was at the time running for a state track team, he was running for Cottonwood High School, and I had gone to Bingham to see their football program. And during that time period, we'd done a lot of praying because I knew that the next 4 years of my life were very important as far as getting a scholarship for football and for basketball, if it was our Father in Heaven's will. And so the time came where Bingham wasn't really a fit for me at the time, and so my brother had said, you should really come out and check out their football practices. They're really great football coaches there. And so I went the first day, and I loved it there. And my dad and I, we enrolled there, and then during my time period there, I didn't know anyone there. And so I was very grateful for the seminary program that they had there. And I guarantee if it wasn't for those seminary teachers teaching us about, the basic principles of the gospel, it would have been very hard for me to decide, to go on these missions. And so, I'd done everything that I could, going to young men's, young women's, doing my Duty to God program, fulfilling my responsibilities as, quorum president at the time. And so it wasn't until then when the opportunity came to receive scholarships that it really shook my testimony. And I remember asking my Father in heaven, if it be your will this year as my senior year, if I become one of the best here in the state, if you will allow me to have a scholarship, I'll do everything in my power to do anything I can, to pay you back in a sense, And so the season came, and I started, I saw my name in newspaper articles. I saw my name in, Players of the Week. And then I started to slowly slip away from what the gospel taught. And I slowly started to forget what my parents had taught me, my entire life, of what the gospel has to offer. And I started seeing what the world had to offer. With these college coaches that were coming in and interviewing, they would say, our school is such a great program for you, and it fits you because, they say that, you wanted to go into this, you wanted to go into business, you want to do all these things, and you'd be away from your family, and it was so enticing to me to see, oh man, this college life is something that I'm looking forward to. And then when, any topic of what the gospel was, any topic of what serving a mission was, I kind of pushed it aside because I knew that would prohibit me from playing college football. And so, for the first 13 games of my season, I was in denial of serving a mission, up until these coaches were calling me, by phone, and they knew my name, they knew, what position I played, how many yards I had that season, how many touchdowns, and they were telling me all these beautiful things about what these colleges had to offer, that when the time came, even some of my peers and even some of these people I looked up to in the football world, they were telling me, if you serve your mission, it will ruin your football career. And I sat there and I was playing, the pros and cons of serving a mission versus, playing college football. And so the cons outweighed my pros when it came to football. And I knew that if I didn't make a decision then and there, that I could potentially ruin or forfeit the blessings that would come from serving a mission. And so that year alone, my parents and I had gone to the temple numerous times, just praying and asking Heavenly Father for just a scholarship to be given. And during that time, these coaches were calling, and even calling my parents, calling my coaches, calling the school, asking for me. And it became so overwhelming to me that that it did come to the point where I didn't want to serve. And I told my coaches, I'm not going to serve my mission. I really want to, I really want to go out there and do my 4 years, and then in hopes make it to the NFL. And I explained to my parents, if I can make it, I could pay off your mortgage. I could pay off everything that you guys owe here on this home, and then you guys will be debt free. And then I always remember what my dad told me. He said, we may not be rich in what the world has to offer, but we're extremely blessed and rich in blessings. And then it hit me, how selfish I was to see that there was this opportunity to serve 2 years of my life and dedicate it to the Lord, and then have Him prove to me that there's blessings afterwards. And so the day came in February where the University of Wyoming had called, and they'd heard these stories of me turning down these scholarships from numerous schools. And I flew out to Denver, and we drove to Laramie. And what an experience that was. And they showed me that the institute program that they had there. It's a strong LDS faith here, and there are plenty of members here in this university. But like I said before, they were trying to convince me to play at least a year before leaving on my mission. And as hard as it was, I knew for a fact that if I had played a year, I knew I wouldn't have gone on my mission, and I knew I wouldn't have been able to have that opportunity to. So the interview came where the coaches were giving me my final interview before sending me out, and they asked me, this 2-year mission thing that you're wanting to do. It's really hard for us to give you one because there are 25 slots that need to be filled, and if we give one and hold one for the 2 years, that doesn't give us an opportunity to give it to another player who might be interested here in this school. And so I could see why it was hard for a lot of these coaches not to give me a scholarship. But if we're going to talk about BYU and their football team, they boast one of the best return missionary football players here in this program, as well as Utah. And it was hard for me to imagine, if they see the successful rate of what these football players do here in these programs, why not nationally? Why don't they see that? And and then it came down to the part where I didn't want to ask for them to hold the scholarship because I was so scared. I feared what the outcome would have been. And thank goodness I have a father who is very strong in our faith, and he understands what the importance of it was. And he sat and begged in that office, and I remember looking at my dad begging, and how upset and ashamed I was to see this amazing individual who taught me his whole life to be strong in our faith and never waver, never be ashamed of the gospel. And he took that opportunity to teach me in that moment that no matter where you are in life, he'd always have my back. And right then and there, I knew that my father was doing it not for him, and he knew what kind of player I was, but never once did I ever see him boast about me or brag about these feats that I had accomplished during my senior year of football. But in his heart, he knew that if there was an opportunity that he would take it. So they had given me the scholarship then, and it was an amazing opportunity to be able to receive one, because the chances of an individual receiving a scholarship is very slim here in the United States. And so the day came in February where we had all of us had received scholarship on our football team, and the time came, and of the individuals who had signed that year, I was the only one that had left and served my mission. So that was another hard thing because they'd become my, more than my friends, they become my family. And to see these individuals go out and pursue their football dreams, while I went on my 2-year mission, then again it hit me again. Oh, I may not have this opportunity when I get back. And so I graduated high school and turned in my papers, and then I was waiting for just a couple of weeks. And then in July of 2009, my calling came, and I'd been called to serve in the Texas-Dallas mission. And so I knew if I stayed, I was grateful that I'd served stateside, and I was 18 at the time, and so this was before that they had changed the age for serving their missions. And then they said you are to report to the MTC in August 26th. So I had 1 month to really think about this mission, and then as the days gone by, and I really thought about serving this mission. I told myself that if I were to serve this mission, I would do it with no regrets, regardless if there was a scholarship waiting or not. I would dedicate my 2 years, And so I left in, August of 2009, 26th, and served the people of Dallas. And that was one of the most amazing experiences, So I would never trade it for a scholarship now that I think about it. So that was me, in preparation of serving my mission. There are a lot of distractions that come in. And, being a football player and seeing what, we see what the NFL has to offer, endorsements, what they have to pay for these athletes, that I can see why it's so easy for individuals not to serve a mission and not to enjoy the blessings of what a 2-year mission can do. And so that for me was probably the hardest part of preparing to serve a mission, was being able to walk away from something that I loved and had a passion for another thing that I had love and passion for. So between the game and the gospel, I always knew the gospel would always come first. So while I was on the mission, I got hurt because I hit my 18-month marker, and I knew I had gained 75 pounds in Texas because of the good food that the people had given me. And so I turned from being a wide receiver to literally a wide receiver. And I'd send pictures home, and my dad, he was laughing. He says, if you're really wanting to play football after your mission, you might want to cut down on these plates. And, being a Polynesian, food is another religion of our own. We love eating. And when people in Texas found out, there's a Polynesian in our ward, I was like, let's feed him the best kind of food. And so, they're deep frying all these chickens, deep frying Twinkies, Snickers, you name it. And then I'd finally sat down for once and looked at myself in the mirror, and I said, wow, you have gained a ton of weight. And typically receivers in college need to be at least 200 to 190 to 200, and I'd hit at least 260. And so my dad, I'd left my mission 160, and I'd come back home at like 245, so almost 85 pounds. And so I decided that it was time for me to get back in lifting. So, I was waking up at 6 doing my lifting. And then because I'd done it so aggressively, I'd hurt my labrum and I'd torn it. So what they said is there's these tendons that connect from your bicep to your shoulder, and that's why it torn. And so I'd come home for 2 months, and then I went back on my mission, and then finished my 9 months out there. And so post mission, I came home, and I was excited. I was so happy that I'd served my mission and learned a lot. And then it was time for me to register for school. So I'd called the University of Wyoming. They had my name down, and they said, you're the missionary that they've been waiting for. And I said, okay, awesome. They have my scholarship waiting for me. I just need to prepare. So I had filled out my application to go to college. I'd done all my things that I needed to do, and then they never called back. So I spent a couple of days wondering where they were, left messages, And then my dad told me, you probably should just drive up there and see what the issues are. And so I drove 6 hours to Laramie, and met with the front office, and I told them, it's like, hey, I'm Alo. You guys had told me that you would save a scholarship for me for serving my 2 years in Dallas. I was just wondering if we can get that process started. And the lady in the front desk, she went to the back and was gone for a half hour. She'd come back and she says, you know what, there's issues that were involved while you were serving your mission, so your scholarship is no longer available. And so you want to talk about something that's rocking your testimony after you'd served a mission. It was right then and there. And I was so upset, because I had dedicated my 2 years, and I had told Heavenly Father that if I was to serve this mission, and if it would be His will, that I would receive any, the scholarship that would still be there. And I was so upset, and I was even upset with our Father in heaven, because I told him, I was like, I'm walking away from this game that I love to do something even more. And what was even more upsetting was that the head coach didn't even want to meet with me. So I met with another coach that was there, and he explained to me the process of how scholarships are given. And I had told him, so, you had my email. You could have just emailed me while I was on my mission, and it would have been better for me not to, make this drive. And he told me, we're extremely busy during the season, and, we just neglected to email you. And so I said, well, what are my options now? And he says, well, you can walk on. And so walking on would mean that I would have to pay tuition out of pocket, which is something I didn't have. And because I was an out-of-state athlete, I'd have to pay out-of-state tuition to that college. So I said, a scholarship or paying out-of-state tuition, what kind of deal what kind of deal is that? And so he just, all they could say was, we're sorry. So luckily I had taken a companion of mine with me to this university, Elder Folau. And on our way back, he and I just talked about our mission for 6 hours straight. Talked about, what we learned, the people that we served, the lessons that we were able to learn while we were out there. And it slowly took away the pain from losing a scholarship. And then we hit here in this program, and he told me, and I told him in the car, and I was so upset, and I told him, I'd made a deal with God. And then he looked at me and just kind of laughed, and he says, you don't get to make deals with God. God makes deals with you. And if He does make a deal with you, the contract or whatever, he's trying to make a metaphor, but the contract that you sign is according to His terms, not yours. And it was so humbling to have, and I needed someone like that. You need someone to slap you and tell you, what are you doing, man? Like, you don't make terms with God. You don't make contracts with Him. And so, I was extremely grateful for him. And so, he left back to Sacramento, and I told my parents of these different things. And so, these junior colleges had heard that, I'd lost my scholarship. And so then more calls came in, Mount Sac College was like, hey, we heard about your situation, you want to come play for us. Snow College had called and said, we have a scholarship waiting for you here. And, I was extremely blessed. And I knew Heavenly Father was looking out for me, and how dare I ever shake my fist at Him. And so, I'd visited these colleges, and I knew that there was an opportunity elsewhere. So Arizona was waiting, and my cousin had called him and said, hey, they told me that the programs out there are really good. And he says, yeah, like if you're really looking to get back to the Division I, this is the place to go. And so I had no job, had no money, and I told my parents, I was like, I'll find a way out there. And I'm so grateful for my parents for trusting me to have that ability to make a road for myself, And so they said, well, go out there and make what you need to do. So I went out there and found a job working for my uncle's restaurant, and then moved in with 8 roommates. So 8 college football players. And, what an experience that was. And of the 8, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us who'd served missions. So you could see, and that was an amazing thing to have 5 of the 8, and we're all LDS members. So during that time period, I had enrolled at Mesa Community College, and played some time there, um, and then they offered a scholarship, and there was one left. And because I was a walk-on at that school, I had to do everything in my power to get that scholarship. And a day before signing day, they'd given the scholarship to someone else. So here I was, no scholarship again, a walk-on, and paying out of my pocket, making $9 an hour at this restaurant. And so, when people talk about their post-mission, a lot of people, I feel, they don't really talk about the struggles that they face. And I'm not anything special, and I know there's a lot of people out there who struggled after their mission. But to me, this was because I had been given so many opportunities before. Everything was practically given. Go play for this football team, go play for this basketball team. Now it was like, well, if you want a scholarship, go work for it, and then it's taken away, and then I really had to sit down, and I redshirted that year because of the amount of time that I wasn't playing, and I knew that I wasn't going to get any field time. And so I'd redshirted that year and decided just to dedicate my time to school. And so I'd finished my first semester there, and then I met my wife in the single adult ward. So for me, I never thought those things worked. I was like, single ward, never want to meet. But we did meet there, and then she was really adamant about me continuing. She says, if you really want to do this, I'll support you 100%. And then I woke up one morning, and then the desires to play, I didn't want to do it then. So I knew I had to focus on myself. And I knew that because so much damage had been done to me, that I really, really needed to get back to the basics of reading and going back to church. And so I'd spent a year away from the game of football, really praying and really understanding, the gospel and having a post-mission life. And then I was ready. I was ready to get married. And so it's like, marriage and football, well, here we go. So I decided to ask my wife to marry me, and we got married in 2013 of August 3rd. And then we moved back here to Utah, and then an opportunity came to play for the U. And so all I had to do was finish a certain amount of credits, because you needed to finish at least your AA before you receive a scholarship to a university. And so I had one more year left, and so I had enrolled in SLIC, trying to finish all that I could. And my wife was suffering some health issues from endometriosis and possibly PCOS. And then I had to walk away from the game because of the amount of time that my wife was in the hospital. I couldn't finish schooling. So then 2 years after I'd come home from my mission, I think Heavenly Father was telling me that football wasn't an option for me. And so the day came where I was here in Utah. I was training to get ready for the football season, and I was at the gym, and I had just finished my workout, and then it hit me that football was no longer in me. And I had to come home and tell my wife that football wasn't in our cards. And was I bitter? No. I was actually relieved knowing that I now have a new road to pursue. And so during that time, my wife and I were trying to have kids, and we couldn't for some reason. And numerous amount of ER visits and these doctors telling us that they didn't know what was wrong with my wife. It was heartbreaking to see that my wife wasn't able to have the one thing that she always wanted, was a family. And so I kind of sat back and, again, was upset with our Father in heaven, saying I had walked away from the game. I really wanted to do something special, and we couldn't have children of our own. So my brother, who works for a foster agency, called me and says, there's a family of 3 ready to be adopted or fostered? Would you be willing to? And of course, my wife and I were ready, and we told him, like, yeah, we're ready. And then 2 minutes later, he called back. He's like, well, it's a family of 6, but they wanted to separate them 3 by 3. And I had never raised a child on my own, ever. And my wife was like, oh my gosh, 6? It's like, we haven't even had one. And I looked at and I called my wife, and she was at work. She's like, are you ready? And I was like, I don't know. I can't make that decision right here at work. I need to come home and maybe pray about it. So we prayed, and my wife, we received the answer. We're like, okay, we won't separate them. And then I was a young men's president at the time in our ward. And one of my young men, he had been struggling, and he'd been sent back home to Oakland. And so his mom and I, we had grown up together. And so I talked to his mom about having him stay with us. So 6 plus 1, and that would make 7 kids to raise with no parenting experiences. So my wife and I, we had taken 7, and, we tried our best to teach them, the values of what a good home looks like. And, we had to break bad habits and create new ones. And so bringing them to church and having them really engage themselves in the gospel is honestly, I think, is what saved them. And, to no credit of, I don't take credit for anything that we've done. Because if you look at us, we don't know anything about raising kids. But we pray to our Father in heaven to give us, at least some roads to take and give us opportunities to teach these children. And he did. He came through, 100% for my wife and I. And we've had him for 2 years now. And we have this opportunity in December to adopt him. So I look forward to that meeting in December when we go to court and meet with the judge, and we can talk about adopting. So, if you think about it, I went from running to making catches to all these things, and now I'm changing diapers and, feeding these kids and becoming a full-time dad. And, there are people out there who are a little upset, that I wasn't able to do it. And, and I hear a lot of people talking about, he was one of the greats. He could have made it, and he could have really done something. But in myself, I am really doing something. I'm making a change for these kids, and that's something I would never change. So, if you were to ask me a couple years ago, or before my mission, if it was football or trying to raise 6 kids, it would have been football all the way. But here I am, 7 years later from graduating high school, and you ask me now, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't trade this for the world. I'd rather raise my 6 kids than play the game. So, but that's it.